Welcome to this week's episode of Green Tagged Theme Park in 30. Scott and I are back from our sojourn in the Middle East at the IAPA Middle East Trade Summit. But right now, while you all are listening to this, we are at Transworld's Halloween and Attraction Shows, which is the largest professional Halloween trade show in the world. So we're recording this early. So if there's some crazy news that has come out and you're wondering why we're not talking about it, that's why, because we're having to do this one early because we're both currently at the trade show.
Yes, I'm teaching a seminar on something. It could be
Halloween. Seminars, different
things.
Be
Halloween, could be Christmas, could be immersive theater, could be hosting the Oscars. I have no idea, but
who knows?
All of that is going on right now.
So this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about, of course, the Horror Unleashed opening, but then we're also going to talk a little bit about China and whether or not it is recovering. So first, Scott, you know that I was going to start with this one, of course.
Of course you were.
It's my jam, but it's also thematic because we're at the Halloween show. So the Horror Unleashed has announced their dates and tickets. So y'all remember, this is Universal's first full year-round haunted attraction in Las Vegas. It's located in the AREA15 district, and they announced that it's going to open on August 14th. Admission will range from $69 to $149, depending on the type and access. And it's 100,000 square feet. And they're debuting initially with 4 haunted houses plus themed bars and entertainment. The 4 haunted houses they're doing: Universal Monsters, Blumhouse's The Exorcist, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Scarecrow the Reaping. And in looking at the tickets, it's a weird, maybe it's not weird, I don't know, whatever. The tickets seem to fall into like basically 2 buckets right now. And like bucket 1 is you get general admission to the area. So we assume that includes the bars and whatever, like the midway. And then you can access each attraction once. So, and that's where you get the $69 marker. And then the other option is you get unlimited access to the haunts, in addition to access to the regular area. And I think that one's $99 and then up. So it's unclear if there's going to be express or how that any of that is going to go. It's also unclear if they're going to add stuff later or if this is going to stay with 4. Who knows? But this is 4 year-round haunted houses opening in Vegas on August 14th.
Yep, sure is.
Okay.
We'll see. Well, we'll see how it flies. We've talked about this since they've announced it, and that is, it really depends on the execution. It really depends on what the IPs that they selected, because we've been talking about this since before we knew what the IPs were.
Yeah.
I think that first off, let's step into the Wayback Machine for a hot second. Haunted attractions burn hot and fast in Vegas. And or at least they have in the past. I don't know whether this will or not, but I think they have in the past. So we know that they're kind of coming in with something to prove with this particular one. But if anybody can do it, it's going to be Universal. I mean, Halloween Horror Nights has a following that, they will jump off cliffs. They'll lemmingly follow right over a cliff's edge. So I think it's got some legs. What they had talked about early on in their planning was that they would also ramp up during the Halloween season and add additional content. I don't know whether that is still the case or not, but that was part of their original pitch.
This is all we have right now. We don't have anything.
I know. So we really don't know. On a personal level, I think they chose very safe mass appeal IPs. And because of that, I personally am not like, oh, I've got to go see that. There is no must see here for me.
Correct. Yeah.
Because it's all stuff that we've seen before. Or that I will probably see, like, for example, Universal Monsters, I'll probably see executed better at Epic. So there's no absolute must-see for me to... There's no reason for me to go to Vegas to see this. Let me put it that way.
Correct.
That said, this could be brilliant. This could be wonderful. I think on a plus side, I think putting it in Area 15 makes a ton of sense. Right there with Meow Wolf, that has become the hub of the atmospheric entertainment vibe in Vegas. I know the people who are involved in this, and other people that I have either worked with or respect greatly. So I'm excited to see that between, TJ and Aiello and, those guys. They've done great stuff, and I'm sure this is wonderful and lovely. I am most curious to see, and I'm sure they are too, quite honestly, to see how sustainable it will be in Las Vegas and what they need to do as far as change and giving people lighting a fuse as to why you should go see this now. I think there's going to be a huge influx at the beginning because, like I said, Universal Halloween Horror Nights fans are rabid, and they'll ingest anything that in that brand, which is great. And we'll see how long it lasts, and maybe they have plans to change it out on a regular basis. Maybe they will go to more experimental or unique IPs as they evolve. But, and the thing is, if I'm in Vegas, I'll probably go check it out, but it won't take me to Vegas.
Right. I think that you articulated most of my concerns. The way this is presented now, I don't think is a good idea or a sustainable idea. I hope that I'm wrong, right? I mean, because I love Halloween and I love Horror Nights, and I really, I want this to work out. But I don't see. To me, this felt rushed. It was like we have dates and everything just kind of like plopped out at once, and just the website, the ticketing, it all seems rushed. But it also seems like I would say it's less about safe bets and in terms of what IPs were the cheapest is what this looks like, or IPs that they could get the easiest is what this looked like to me. Like, what can we get that's guaranteed that we could have it, for a year in a permanent installation versus having to, because, if I'm sure if they got like it or something, they would have to pay a lot more, and it would, especially if it were a longer
and Universal
thing.
Monsters they own. So,
correct.
That one's good.
Well, they own Scarecrow, they own Universal Monsters. And then there's just Blumhouse and Texas Chainsaw. And I'm not sure if they own Texas Chainsaw, but
I don't know either.
But
that's a good point. I hadn't thought about easiest to sustain for a long period of time, or even IPs that are willing to tie themselves up for that long period of time. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah. It's interesting because when this came out on social media, of course, I have I share a lot of friends or followers on social media with other haunted attractions, with other haunt fans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And anecdotally, the comments that came across were very lackluster.
Yeah.
It did not seem as though people were excited.
I've heard nothing but lackluster responses. And I think exactly your emotional take is what I have been hearing. I've been putting polls out. I've been trying to get the feedback from audiences around. And that's what it seems like. It's like, the problem with, again, we said this way back, the problem with going with IPs like this, they might be cheaper or they might be the ones they could get a longer multi-year deal with or whatever. But since they've been done so many times in Universals with the rabid fans, and even all of them last year, like just recently, it kind of just feels like this is like, it's old already before it hasn't even opened and it's already old. And people don't seem like they're not going to make a trip to Vegas to go see it. And so maybe they're just trying to capture foot traffic. But I will note that Area 15 has been difficult to capture foot traffic. Like that's their number one problem at Area 15 is capturing guests visiting the strip. They're capturing locals.
You have to take a cab to get there.
Correct.
And there's no hotel there.
And a lot of people are not even aware it's a thing. A lot of people that go into Vegas, they stay on the strip. They don't know that it happens outside the strip. So it's mostly locals, and locals are going to go once to this. They're not going to go multiple times.
It's interesting because I'm not certain who their target audience is.
Me neither. Exactly.
That's the question I have. If their target audience is diehard haunt fans / Halloween Horror Nights super fans, this does not seem as though they've hit the bullseye. They're close, but not quite. If their target audience is people who aren't fans, who've heard about Halloween Horror Nights and never really gone, and just happen to be in Vegas and are looking for something other than a Cirque du Soleil show to go do, then this may work. But once again, being in Area 51, which I've already praised them because I think it's a good location for this kind of thing. There's a lot of this kind of thing in Area 51. This is where Meow Wolf is. This is or Omega Mart by Meow Wolf. There's several immersive experiences in Area 15. But at the same time, to your point, Philip, it is a little bit off the beaten path. It is neither on the Strip nor is it downtown. And it's a little tricky to get to, or it was the last time I was there. I haven't been in Vegas for a few years, but it was the last time I was there. So
yeah, I was just there, and it is tricky to get to. Like I was just there like a month ago, and it's still tricky to get to. It's still not something that's frequented by that many tourists that are just visiting, and it also goes against the vibe to me. I don't know, whatever. I guess we'll have to see how it performs, but I guess looking at what my last takeaway is just looking at what they have currently now. I don't know why this is a year-round thing and it's not a temporary thing. Even if just to encourage people to go there. Like if they're like, even if they had just said, we're going to open the haunted houses, everything, but then the haunted houses are going to close November 2nd. I think even that fuse would have at least gotten people there.
Or, since we both just got back from Boulevard City, or if they had set it up and said, we are going to create this environment where we can do, in essence, pop-up haunted attractions based on a rotating palette of, and this may be the plan, who knows, but a rotating palette of IPs, and both IP and non-IP, because there are still those people like me who really could care less about the IP. A perfect example, and sometimes that works to my advantage, and sometimes it works to my disadvantage. When we were in Riyadh, and we did 2 haunted houses together while we were there, and one of them was your standard traditional haunted house, and the other one was based on the IP Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, I know nothing about the Five Nights at Freddy's IP other than it exists, and because I was just looking at it as, oh, here's something cool, I actually enjoyed that one more than the non-IP. Philip had a reverse preference, and they were both, quite honestly, they were both mediocre haunts. But they both had their challenges. Let's put it that way. So I think it's interesting that IP means less to me, but I'm also not the target audience. I realize the power of IP. I know it. I understand it. It's just not me. Yeah. So I get that. So again, I hope that despite all of the naysaying that we're doing here, and I don't want it to sound like naysaying because I'm not saying it's going to suck. It's probably going to be very, very high quality and a lot of fun. But is it, how sustainable is it? How long can it run? I don't know. And even though I sound like I'm being negative, I hope I'm 100% wrong. And I hope that it is a smashing success and breaks open the floodgates of year-round haunted attractions everywhere. I don't know whether that's going to happen. It would be lovely if it did.
Yeah. One thing, just to clarify, a quick fact check that, so The Exorcist Believer is also owned by Universal. So just fact check that really quick. So it's only Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the only IP that they don't own that is opening in Vegas.
And it's probably one that they've had for so long that they can continue. They have a really good working relationship with that negotiation.
And they just did it also in California. So, okay. So, that took a while. It's like Halloween. We got on our soapboxes. Okay, we're getting off soapboxes. We got to go.
Halloween took a while between us. Really, Philip? Yeah, that's a surprise.
Shocker.
Let's go to China now.
Let's move on to China. So this is something that actually came up in a conversation I was having with some folks in the Middle East at the Trade Summit we were at. Our last week's episode was about that. And, we were talking with this group of people about how it used to be that China was positioned as like the epicenter of like the tourism. Like that was the place, if you wanted to, kickstart your career and you didn't want to be in Orlando, or maybe it wasn't working for you in Orlando, you could go to China. And now we were talking about how, well, now it's the Middle East. Like if you want to get paid more or jumpstart your career, try something new or take on more responsibility, you could go to the Middle East and work for a few years and, pump up your resume and get some savings. And then it brought me to thinking about how China is doing, because we haven't talked about it. And there's been a few stories recently that have come out, and so basically what I'm going to do is take those stories, but give you more context about how the economy has been recovering in China. And I think I have not been paying attention, but it does seem like it is rebounding relatively, well, not like super fast, but it's getting back to where it was. And that's no mistake, because the government has really actually been putting money and effort into doing this. So they've been combining investment and policy changes to help the tourism economy rebound. And the first thing they did was the easing of travel restrictions. So by late 2024, citizens of 38 nations could enter visa free. I remember back in the day where that was a huge deal, just getting your visa to China. But yeah, so they're doing visa free stays. 20 million foreign visitors entered China visa free in 2024, which is up 112% from the previous year. So that's clearly working. They've also been offering subsidies and tax breaks to investments in the tourism sector. They're doing local and regional promotions. I totally missed this, but in 2023, they gave away 500,000 free airline tickets for people to visit Hong Kong. So to kind of lure visitors back in coming back to check out those areas. And just recently, the 2024 Golden Week, they saw 765 million domestic trips, which is 10% more than 2019. So at least in terms of domestic stuff for the big holidays, like Golden Week is one of the biggest ones, they're seeing their domestic stuff increase there. They also saw spending and trip counts increase during Golden Week as opposed to 2019. So that's the backdrop that we're seeing. Not too much increase in international trips, but we'll get to that. But that's the backdrop for these three stories. And the three news stories first is the China's Harbin Festival. So the Harbin Ice Snow World, it's the world's largest ice and snow theme park. And those of you that are familiar with the Gaylord Palms and they do the ice shows there,
those are the carvers.
Those are the carvers. They come from this thing. But imagine this, but it's an entire like theme park made out of ice, essentially. And it covers 1 million square meters. So it's enormous. And this last one was the largest one they've ever had. And they saw more visitors than they've ever had there. Like, I believe it was 3 million visitors. 3 million visitors, setting a new record over 52 days, which is crazy. 3 million people in 52 days for the 26th year they've done this. So, and it's, it's ice, there's interactive stuff, there's ice slides, all that kind of stuff going on. That's story one. Story two is that the Harry Potter studio tours announced they're going to open a Chinese version. They're going to go to China in this.
And build a studio and then do a tour of it.
That's the thing that I think is a little weird about that. It's like in classic Chinese fashion, they haven't announced like what sets are going to be there, because in the back, well, like I was thinking that too. I was like, well, I've been to the London tour and that one is enormous and it's crazy and it's fantastic. But also, that's where the studios were, right? So they're just like, they're moving over sets.
Well, yeah, but look at the difference between Universal Studios Hollywood and Universal Studios Orlando. When they first opened, they replicated sets. They replicated sound stages. They replicated outdoor. They ended up using them in future films in Florida, but it was all just a let's build a theme park that's movie based, and let's do it by replicating what already exists. So again, I'm facetious about it that they're going to build a studio that nothing was ever shot on.
Yes,
but quite honestly, Potter fans couldn't care less.
No, I don't think anyone will care. I was going to say, because when I was doing the studio tour in London, there were some areas where you're like, that this was like recreated to make it a themed environment, because it wouldn't work as a set. When you're like walking down the alleyways or just some of the slides and some of these, you're like, this wasn't in the movie, right? But like, it doesn't matter because it's so cool and it's such a themed environment and Potter fans love it. And so I think that part's going to be fine. I just think it's interesting because, mostly like, in the past, China has really tried to focus more on making sure that they're using local IPs or whatever. But in this case, Harry Potter is one of the only things that actually is not censored in China and it's available there. And it's like one of the only things my Chinese friends really know is like Harry Potter, because we all have it. So it makes sense that they're kind of bending this rule a little bit to bring in this investment, trying to bring in something that's foreign, but to kind of help jumpstart the tourism. So it's gonna be part of the action park that's already there. So they're putting it inside of a small like local theme park that already exists. They're just expanding it to add this section to it. Yeah. And then the third story here is about the Chinese cinema. And this gets to what I was just talking about with the IPs and whatnot. But basically, China debuted a sequel to one of their really popular animated movies. And I want to say it's Nija. I don't know. Hopefully that pronunciation isn't terrible. But basically, this animated sequel, unseated Inside Out 2 as the world's top performing animated film in only 7 months, faster than any previous title dethronement. And it's the first non-Hollywood film to crack the international box office top 10 and the first non-English language movie in the top 20. As of Wednesday, February 18th, just a while before we're recording this, but it made $1.69 billion US dollars, surpassing the total box office of the previous record holder, Inside Out 2. So this is a huge accomplishment for the Chinese film industry. And looking back in the context, you can see that this is because they started investing since the pandemic in the film industry and providing incentives and subsidies, like I talked about, into the film industry. And it looks like it's finally paying off. But I'm sure you're going to see themed environments based off of this stuff that they're going to put there to kind of, again, double down. So using this mix of foreign plus local domestic stuff. So I guess, where does that leave us? It leaves us in an interesting spot where you do see tourism is recovering, but it's not quite where it was, although it seems like the domestic stuff is recovering a little bit faster.
I was just going to say, the one thing that China has in its major advantage is, and you've talked about this before, is they don't, because of the population, they don't need as much outside tourism as, say, for example, the Middle East, because there's a lot more people there, and yep. It was the restrictions, the internal restrictions, travel restrictions from one area of China to another that were crippling for some of these experiences, at least from what we've reported in the past. So now that they're back, the thing that I think is most interesting is not really. And I'm even gonna, I don't want to call it minutia, but the smaller areas of the different festivals and the Potter and the cinema is the changes of procedure and how to get into the country and easing. Yep. It's interesting because when you mentioned that that there were now visa free, a new visa free policy, I looked up, again, being USA centric, I looked up what it is, and interestingly enough, it is visa free only if you plan to stay less than 10 days and move on to another country.
Yes.
So you have to. It has to be it's a transitory visa. Yeah. It is not a stay visa. If you have to get a stay visa. You can still get a stay visa if you're going to just go there, but.
It's for tourism. I mean, 10 days or less.
10 days or less, and you must move to another country either before or after visiting China.
Yeah.
So you can't go to the U.S. You can't go from the U.S., go to China, come back to the U.S. and use their free visa or visa free. You have to have another stop in there. So I think that's interesting. To me, that's kind of like saying, okay, we're going to try to bring people to this part of the world. It's sort of like China huddling up with its neighbors, going, okay. We'll give them a free visa, but they got to come visit you too. It's a unique approach, and I think it's kind of interesting actually. I also like the fact that they added 21 new ports of entry.
So just a minor point of clarity. I'm not sure how it works for other people, but specifically for U.S. citizens, you can go to China for 10 days and come back.
Okay, that's not what the AI overview said on my. It says exactly the opposite.
I just got my.
It says U.S. citizens can visit China visa free for up to 10 days if they are transitioning through the country. However, they must continue on to another country. they must continue on to another country in order to visit China visa free. So apparently, even within their own system, they're still in transition and they don't quite know what's going on.
Yeah, because I recently got a visa application for going for IAPA. So, but yeah, overall, it's good that they're trying to get again, making it easier to get there is a huge thing, which you would have thought they would have done previously. But the fact that it took them to 2025 to get you can visit visa situation. I did pull up some information on Hong Kong because in the past, and of course, I'm not sure how accurate this is in terms of I don't have like a government statement as to like their tourism plans, but I know in the past they were looking at making Hong Kong kind of like the tourist capital because they have the parks there. It's that special zoned area like we see in other areas.
And it was built as that. I mean,
yes.
before it was under Chinese rule, it was built as that.
Yes. Yeah. And so looking at Hong Kong, I think is a good example of that. So we look at Hong Kong, they welcomed 44 million visitors in 2024, which is a 31% jump from 2023, but it's still much lower than their record in 2018. So their record was 65 million in 2018, and now it's 44. So that's kind of where the Hong Kong Tourism Board was forecasting it. It just barely missed their forecast, but so again, you can still see the struggles. Like it hasn't quite recovered there. Hong Kong also was much more reliant on international visitors than they were, people just coming from mainland China.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see where that's it. Interestingly, in the last report they put out, we saw a shift in traveler profiles. So they noted more budget conscious mainland visitors as opposed to luxury shoppers who came from other countries, which just exactly what we've been talking about. Like, so even in the Hong Kong area, they're trying to create stuff, they've seen like a 16% drop in per visitor spending in 2024, despite the foot traffic, just because of this kind of shift. And that all makes sense. If you're getting more people that are coming from mainland and you're trying to incentivize them to get there with subsidized trips, they're not going to be the luxury tourists that you're going to get from Europe or for other places that are planning to spend more money, essentially. So I think in summary, we can see that the tourism is rebounding, but more gradually. The foreign visitors are climbing fast, but they're still not, near where it was. But it looks like that the government is interested, at least in workshopping policies and investment and changing this. So I do think it's going to get back. And it's actually overall, it's better than I thought.
Right. And I think it's important to recognize that, visa free for transition, because, you just said you got a visa. Well, you don't need to get a visa if you're moving on to another country. That's the point.
Yeah. Correct.
You can go visa free. You said you got a visa. So yes, you have to get a visa to go to China and come back to the US. I think these kinds of policies, though, are important. And I don't think we can toss them aside, because basically it's the government doubling down or reinvesting in the tourism sector. Not all countries do that.
Exactly.
And I think it is. I think it is important to recognize that they're trying to find ways to get people to come to either China specifically or that part of the world. Another thing that I have found most interesting that is not necessarily, it is subsidized by the government, but people who are flying through Doha. Doha is a huge hub right now. There's not many people say, "Oh, let's vacation in Doha." I'm sure it's lovely. I've never spent any time there other than in the airport. But what they're doing now is they are subsidizing 4-star hotels to give you $49 US room nights up to 4 nights if you decide to spend some time in Doha. So it seems as though, just like the transitory 10-day visa-free visit to China, or the spend a night in Doha and get a high-end hotel for a cheap price, it seems as though areas are starting to band together now, and there's a little bit less competition between only come to China, don't go anywhere else, or only come to Saudi and don't go anywhere else. It sounds as though there's some collaboration and cooperation going on there. Does this mean that China their tourism is recovering? Well, I think it is a sign that they're certainly looking at all the ways they possibly can to make it recover, and not just not just within their own country, which I think is a unique perspective.
Yeah, I think to your point, there it's a little bit of a mix of both, right? Like we do see the government, to your point. I mean, they are trying not just with incentives, monetary incentives, but also with policy incentives. They're trying to encourage it, but at the same time, we do see it rebounding naturally on its own. Like, the Harbin Ice Festival is a great example of that. Like, that's just a local thing. No one needs visas, right? It's just local thing.
Yeah,
and
it's not
3
international
million,
at all. And that goes back to my statement earlier when I said China doesn't need the international tourism because of their
Yep, correct.
population. They just need to be able to travel within their own country. And
Yep.
then the addition of international visitation is icing on the cake, so to speak. But we've nibbled up pretty much all the cake we have for this week. So how is that for an awkward transition? But it's time for us to finish. So on behalf of Philip Hernandez and myself, Scott Swenson, this is Green Tag Theme Park in 30. Thank you so much for listening. And we will see you all next week.